My name is Lizzy LeRud. I'm a postdoctoral fellow here at the Fox Center, and prior to this I was at the University of Oregon. I completed my Ph.D. in 2017 and taught there for a year and at Willamette University for a year before arriving here. My work is in American poetry, and the project I'm working on here as a fellow is my dissertation turning into a book, becoming a book, which is called Antagonistic Cooperation, Poetry in the Age of Prose. And it's about the poetry-prose dichotomy and the distinction that writers, critics, scholars, anybody who's working with, reading, consuming, reproducing literature is using to sort these types of texts into categories of poetry and prose. And a piece of my research is pointing out how actually quite recent this dichotomy is, and thinking about its effects in this kind of more recent span of time than we generally consider, which is the 19th and the 20th century especially. And I work primarily on American poets, and this project is looking at not only how critics and writers talk about poetry and prose and how those categories kind of direct conversations about poetry especially, but also how writers are using those categories and manipulating them and kind of pushing against them, as well as incorporating them into how they conceive of texts and their creative work. I knew that the gift of being here would be the time and the space to work on these ideas, to let these ideas sit with me and follow me throughout the day, and to have large spans of time. One of the things I've really realized this year is just thinking takes a lot of time, and it takes the right setting to let those things happen. Not just time, but a space. It's so quiet in this house, in delightful ways. Interspersed with that, the Fox Center balances that kind of like cloistered scholarly experience with a community, with people who are doing the same kind of work to come alongside you, because you can never quite do that stuff on your own. So of course our weekly lunches are the thing that kind of anchors that, and also just having people's offices nearby me, my neighbors that I chat with and see on a regular basis. I also, as a postdoctoral fellow, I also get to teach, and that's been another way to kind of put my, get to put my ideas out in the world and get to talk about poems with people and stay in dialogue. But yeah, the big gift is getting to teach. The other thing that I knew I wanted to say here is that I knew coming in that I'd worked in English departments and kind of been in that, my silo of the academy. Knew how that worked, knew it would be delightful to continue doing work in my discipline, and I was very excited about that. The thing that I did not anticipate was the benefit of working with people from very different fields in the humanities. The first real benefit of that for me was to see how my field is different from theirs, and to understand why I do things the way that I do them. That helped me kind of clarify, I think, the big boundaries of my work in general. But then, of course, to hear what they're doing, and to think about the motivations that have created our different kinds of fields, the way that those fields overlap, of course, and the ways that they that the boundaries are more permeable than I think they. I'd say the boundaries are more fixed than they need to be. I think that there's a lot more overlap there than we account for sometimes in the way that we organize classes or organize departments or make sure people are in their programs. So the Fox Center, I think, is a unique opportunity in a place like Emory and in an institution for that kind of humanities interaction, and that's been really valuable to me, and I would not have been able to imagine that would have such a difference in my work. So my position is I'm the N.E.H. Postdoctoral Fellow in Poetics. And that is kind of a unique thing in poetry. There aren't a lot of other established positions that are dedicated to studying poetry. So this came on my radar as a as a doctoral student. And I think that it's and as I've kind of understood what it meant to be in this position, I've learned that it's a position that's on the radar of poetry scholars in general, which is pretty neat. It's really an honor to be part of this kind of cohort, of this lineage of people who have also held this position. It's encouraging to think about the things that they've done, the work that they do, which I deeply admire, and to hope that I can make that kind of contribution after having had this experience. So I'm kind of a part of that fellowship, as well as the cohort that I'm in here as a fellow of this year. And that's pretty neat. I have, as being the Poetics Fellow, I've met other past Poetics Fellows now at conferences, and one of them I already knew very closely, who's a close friend, and so it's kind of a nice way to be connected. It's a really neat environment. And a connection then, I guess, I could make is the thing I didn't talk about is the Rose Library, and Emory is especially conducive to poetry studies, I think, in a lot of ways because of that Rose Library. It's the one of the largest collections of poetry manuscripts and texts in a university setting. I'm pretty sure about that. And it's just a beautiful place to work and study, and with fabulous resources and a active reading series. So Emory's been a really fun place to do that work too.